Okay, let's dive right in. If you've ever looked at an incredibly articulate, super smart kid and wondered, how are they still struggling to read? Well, you are in the exact right place. Today, in this explainer, we're unpacking this really profound gap between the language we naturally speak and the literal words we have to decode on a page. We're going to explore the fascinating mechanics of how reading actually happens in the brain and, look at some actionable ways to build stronger readers.
So let's start with this foundational, honestly, kind of shocking concept. Humans are biologically wired for spoken language, but we are not biologically wired for written language. Just think about that for a second. Humans have been speaking for hundreds of thousands of years, right? Babies naturally absorb rhythm and tone. They babble, they imitate, they just start talking to get what they want. But reading? Totally different story. That's a human invention, and it's only a few thousand years old. Our brains literally do not come with a built-in reading button.
The contrast here is just night and day. Spoken language, that's a biological given. It's completely natural, driven by basic imitation. Written language, on the other hand, is a whole different ballgame. Because no part of the human brain is born knowing how to read, reading has to be explicitly taught. We literally have to rewire the brain so it can connect visual symbols, the little squiggles on a page, to the sounds and meanings of the spoken language it already knows.
Now, to really see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at a specific story. Meet Dajwan. He's a student who perfectly illustrates this huge difference between oral language and written language. This kid was absolutely gifted with words.
I mean, he could speak with rhythm, confidence, humor, style, the whole shebang. If you asked him a simple question, he wouldn't just answer it, he'd spin it into an entire story. He came from this rich family culture of talkers and orators. Engaging conversation and vibrant storytelling were just woven into his daily life at home. He knew exactly how to charm a room, make people laugh, and actually explain complex ideas in a way that made you think, wow, this child is brilliant. And honestly, he truly was brilliant.
But here's the catch. With all of that verbal brilliance, all that confidence, and his literal superpower of holding the attention of an entire room, what was the problem? How could a kid this smart, this articulate, be struggling so much in school?
Well, here is the heartbreaking paradox. Dajwan could not read. His massive oral language strengths were basically acting as this incredibly effective smokescreen, completely hiding his profound struggles with written text. Because he was so exceptionally good at talking, it was dangerously easy for everyone to miss the fact that the letters on the page meant absolutely nothing to him.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how a highly capable student will use their own strengths as a defense mechanism. Think about it. If it was time to read aloud, Dajwan would just crack a joke. If he hit a word he didn't know, no problem. He'd pivot seamlessly into this captivating, entirely made-up story. He actively used his humor and his incredible gift of gab to shift the room's focus away from the text and right onto his personality. He was basically hiding in plain sight.
It's absolutely crucial that we don't misdiagnose what's going on in situations like this. See, Dajwan didn't lack intelligence, he didn't lack creativity, and he definitely didn't lack language. What he lacked was access to the written code. Nobody had effectively taught him how to connect the massive, expansive vocabulary he was already carrying around in his head to those artificial visual symbols printed in his books.
So to bridge that gap, Dajwan needed something highly specific: explicit phonics instruction. That means systematically teaching him how written language actually works under the hood, the precise relationship between sounds and letters. Instead of just letting him talk his way around words he didn't recognize, he needed practice decoding them, breaking them apart, blending the sounds back together, and really actively linking his spoken language to reading language.
And this individual story fits so perfectly into the much broader research-backed framework that we call the science of reading. The science of reading basically shows us that skilled reading isn't just one magic trick. It actually requires two very distinct pillars working together: word recognition and language comprehension. Dajwan already had the language comprehension part nailed down. He just desperately needed the word recognition piece to unlock the text.
So, the crucial point is this. You absolutely need both of these elements to achieve skilled reading. Step 1 is word recognition. That's lifting the words off the page. Step 2 is language comprehension, which relies on your vocabulary and background knowledge to actually understand what those words mean. And step 3? Well, multiply those two elements together like a simple math equation, and boom, you get skilled reading.
But actually, let's look at the fascinating flip side of Dejuan's struggle. You can also have students who decode perfectly but completely lack language comprehension, right? A student might sound out every single word on the page flawlessly, but if they don't have the vocabulary, the background knowledge, or the oral language foundation to understand what those words are actually saying, they still aren't truly reading. Decoding without comprehension is not skilled reading. You've got to have both.
Let's zoom out and see how this builds, because this foundation actually starts taking shape long before a child ever picks up a book on their own. If you look at the timeline of language development, it starts super simply by just hearing conversations. Then, it grows when adults read aloud to them. It strengthens when kids are encouraged to actively talk about ideas. And it deepens even more as they expand their vocabulary across different subjects. This rich language environment, that's the fertile soil where reading comprehension eventually takes root.
So, if you're an educator or a parent, how do you actually build this environment? It really comes down to keeping language deeply, vibrantly alive in your space. We need frequent read-alouds and storytelling. We need to set up academic conversations and partner talk, so kids are forced to actively use their words. And we definitely need explicit vocabulary instruction, along with sentence frames and deep questioning. You know, all these activities make sure students aren't just passively listening to language, but they're getting in there and actively practicing it.
Now, as we implement those strategies, there is one absolutely vital distinction we have to keep in mind. Confidence in speaking is not the same as mastery in reading. We absolutely want to honor a student's language strengths. We want to celebrate their voice, for sure. But we really cannot assume that just because they give a brilliant verbal answer, they can read the text independently. We have to assess carefully so we aren't getting totally distracted by how well they talk.
Dejuan's story is such a great reminder that every single student has a story. And struggling readers, well, they find incredibly creative ways to hide. Some of them just withdraw into silence, sitting quietly hoping you won't call on them. Some act out with disruptive behavior just to get sent to the hallway during reading time. Some use humor as a shield. And some, just like Dejuan, use their sheer charm and gift of language to make you look the other way.
Which leaves us with this really powerful thought. Behind the talking, the joking, the storytelling, and all that charm, there may be a student who is just waiting for someone to teach them how to break the code. Think about the class clowns or the super talkative kids in your own life. Are they just being social, or are they hiding a desperate need for the written code? Let's make sure we're giving every single student the exact key they need to bridge their beautiful spoken words to the true power of print. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep looking closer.